Excuse me, sir. I think there's an error in your calculation.
Grant Harrington turned slowly, apron stained, hands rough, skin black.
A filthy black waitress correcting my math?
He stood up.
You people can barely spell your own names. I dare you, solve it! $1 million if you can!
I didn't mean to offend.
Shut your mouth!
He stepped closer.
Can you even read numbers? Or do they keep you around because you're cheap labor? Go scrub a toilet! That's your ceiling!
Everyone laughed. Phones went up. No one said stop. Whitney Adams took the marker from his hand. The grin on Harrington's face would not last long. Not a single person in that room had any idea what was about to happen next. The Sterling was not a restaurant. It was a verdict. A place where Manhattan's financial elite came to remind each other, and everyone beneath them, exactly where the lines were drawn. Crystal chandeliers hung above tables dressed in white linen. The wine list started at $300. The waitstaff moved in silence, trained to be invisible. Whitney Adams had worked there for 4 years. She was 26. She'd been invisible her whole life. Her mother died when Whitney was 15. Ovarian cancer. No insurance. The hospital bills ate through everything. The apartment, the savings, even the furniture. Whitney dropped out of school at 17 to work 2 jobs. Her younger sister, Bria, was 12 then. Someone had to keep her fed. Someone had to keep the lights on. So Whitney carried plates. She mopped floors. She smiled through tips that barely covered rent in a studio apartment in the Bronx. And every night, after Bria fell asleep, Whitney sat on the kitchen floor with a stack of library books. Calculus, linear algebra, probability theory, topology. She watched MIT OpenCourseWare lectures on a cracked phone screen until her eyes burned. She solved problems in a 70-cent notebook, filling it front to back, then flipping it upside down and starting again. No degree, no tutor, no classroom. Just a mind that wouldn't stop working. But no one at the Sterling knew any of that. To them, Whitney was the quiet black girl who poured water and cleared plates. Nothing more. The head chef called her the ghost. The sommelier once told the guest she probably couldn't tell Bordeaux from boxed wine. She heard it. She always heard it. She never said a word. Tonight, the Sterling had been booked for a private event, an investor showcase hosted by Grant Harrington, founder and CEO of Harrington Capital. Forbes had him at $4.2 billion. Wall Street called him the Hammer. Not because he built things, but because he crushed anyone who stood in his way. Hostile takeovers, gutted companies, careers destroyed over a handshake and a smile. Harrington had built his empire on one belief: intelligence was inherited, not earned. He said it in interviews. He wrote it in op-eds. He funded studies that tried to prove it. The quiet part, the part everyone understood, but no one repeated on camera, was that he believed it most about people who looked like Whitney. Tonight, 30 investors filled the private dining room. Hedge fund managers, venture capitalists, 2 senators' spouses, a retired federal judge, the kind of crowd that measured people by net worth and zip code. Whitney moved between them like a ghost, refilling glasses, replacing silverware, keeping her eyes low. Early in the evening, Harrington snapped his fingers at her without looking. "You, black girl, more ice." Whitney brought the ice. He didn't say thank you. 10 minutes later, she reached across to clear a plate. Harrington pulled his napkin away from her hand. "Don't touch my things," he said. "I don't know where those hands have been." His guest laughed into his champagne glass. Whitney said nothing. She stepped back. She kept moving. Harrington had set up a whiteboard near the head of the table. His presentation was the centerpiece of the evening. A proprietary risk assessment model his team of PhDs had spent 18 months building. He called it the Oracle. He claimed it could predict market crashes with 94% accuracy. The investors leaned in. The champagne flowed. The numbers on the board multiplied, and the whole thing was being live streamed. 2 cameras, a tech crew from a financial media outlet. Harrington wanted the world to see his genius. He wanted the validation, the applause, the headlines. Whitney carried a tray of hors d'oeuvres past the whiteboard. She wasn't supposed to look, but she did. And in the half second her eyes swept across the board, she saw it. A transposed variance coefficient in the third-tier equation. A small error, the kind most people would miss. The kind that would cascade through every projection and inflate returns by nearly 20%. She kept walking, set the tray down, came back. It was still there, the wrong number, sitting in the middle of Harrington's masterpiece like a crack in a diamond. She should have stayed quiet. Every lesson her life had taught her said the same thing. Keep your head down, don't make waves, survive. But the number was wrong, and Whitney Adams could not walk past a wrong number. She stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir." That was when everything changed. The room had 34 people in it. Not one of them expected what happened next. Whitney stood 3 feet from the whiteboard, her voice low but steady. "The variance coefficient in the third-tier equation. It's transposed. The sigma and mu values are switched." Silence. The kind that presses against your ears. Harrington blinked. Then he laughed. A short, dry sound, like a match striking. He looked around the room, waiting for his guests to join in. They did. A few chuckles, a shake of the head. One man muttered, "Is this a joke?" "Let me get this straight," Harrington said, turning to face her fully. He folded his arms. "You, a waitress who earns less in a year than I spend on shoes, are telling me that my team of PhDs from MIT, Stanford, and Cambridge got it wrong?" "I'm not talking about your team, sir. I'm talking about the number on the board." "And what exactly qualifies you to talk about any number on any board?" He stepped closer. "Did you learn statistics while scrubbing pots? Did they teach probability between bussing tables?" A woman near the window shook her head and whispered to her husband. "The audacity!" Her husband nodded. Someone should call her manager. Whitney's hand was steady. Her voice didn't waver. "The transposition changes the tail risk projection. If the model runs with those values, it overestimates returns by roughly 20%. Your investors would be making decisions based on inflated confidence intervals." The laughter stopped, not all at once. It drained out of the room the way color drains from a face. One investor, a silver-haired man in a navy suit, reached for his laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard. He frowned. Then he looked up. He didn't look at Harrington. He looked at Whitney. Harrington saw it, the shift. He felt the room tilt, just slightly, just enough, away from him. And that made it worse. That a black waitress had made his guests pause, even for a second, was something he could not forgive. "This is ridiculous." His voice was louder now, sharper. "You're a waitress. You don't get to walk up to a $4 billion presentation and pretend you understand what's on that board. You got lucky. You overheard something. That's all this is." "I didn't overhear anything, sir. I read it." "You read it. He repeated her words slowly, mockingly, turning to his audience. She read it. Ladies and gentlemen, the dishwasher reads quantitative finance. More laughter, louder this time. Someone clapped twice. Then Harrington grabbed a marker from the tray beneath the whiteboard. He uncapped it and wrote a new equation. Longer, denser, layered with nested integrals and conditional probabilities. The kind of problem his quant team took days to model. He held the marker out to Whitney. Solve this, right now, in front of everyone. The room went still. 34 pairs of eyes locked onto the black waitress in the stained apron, standing in front of a whiteboard full of numbers that most people in that room couldn't read. And if you can't, Harrington's voice dropped, you walk out that door. No job, no reference, nothing. You disappear, and we never have to look at you again. Whitney looked at the equation. She looked at the marker in his hand. She looked at the room, the phones, the cameras, the live stream light blinking red. Then she took the marker. Okay, she said. Harrington smiled. The kind of smile that assumes the ending before the story is told. He turned to his guests, hands spread wide as if to say, watch this. He had no idea what he'd just started. Whitney uncapped the marker. The smell of dry erase ink filled her nose. Sharp, chemical, familiar in a way no one in that room would understand. She'd used markers like this 1,000 times, standing in front of bathroom mirrors in public libraries, working through equations on paper towels taped to the glass. She looked at the equation Harrington had written. It was layered. Nested integrals wrapped around conditional probability functions, feeding into a Monte Carlo output matrix. Designed to intimidate. Designed to make a person freeze. Whitney didn't freeze. She started at the top. Her handwriting was small, precise, nothing like the bold strokes Harrington had used. She didn't explain what she was doing. She didn't narrate. She just wrote. The room watched. Harrington leaned against the edge of a table, arms crossed, the smirk still carved into his face. He whispered to his CFO, loud enough for the front row to hear. $5 says she doesn't make it past the second line. Whitney made it past the second line, and the third, and the fourth. She isolated the stochastic variable first, pulling it out of the nested integral and rewriting the boundary conditions. It was the kind of move that told you immediately whether someone understood the architecture of the problem or was just guessing. Whitney wasn't guessing. She saw the structure the way a mechanic hears an engine. Not the noise, but the rhythm underneath. A young analyst at the second table leaned forward in his seat. He was watching Whitney's hand move across the board, and his mouth was slightly open. He recognized what she was doing, a dimensional reduction technique he'd only ever seen in graduate-level papers. He turned to the woman next to him. "That's not standard," he whispered. "That's elegant." The woman shushed him. Then Whitney stopped. Her marker hovered over the third line. She tilted her head, read it again. Then she circled a small cluster of numbers near the bottom of Harrington's original equation, a decay constant buried inside a summation. "This is wrong," she said quietly. Harrington uncrossed his arms. "Excuse me?" "The decay constant." Whitney tapped the board. "It's set at 0.07, but the underlying asset class you're modeling, high-yield corporate bonds, has a historical default decay closer to 0.043. You've inflated the decay rate, which compresses the tail distribution and makes your model appear more stable than it actually is." Nobody in the room breathed. "In plain terms," Whitney continued, still facing the board, Your model tells investors the risk is low, but it's not. It's hidden. And when the market corrects, and it will, the losses won't be 15%. They'll be closer to 38. She wrote the corrected number on the board, drew a line through Harrington's. Then she kept solving. Harrington pushed off the table. That number was verified by my entire research division. 12 PhDs. You're telling me you know better than 12 PhDs? Whitney didn't turn around. I'm telling you, the number is wrong, sir. Based on what? Your waitressing degree? He looked at his guests for support. A few smiled, but fewer than before. The room was shifting, and Harrington could feel it, like sand moving under his feet. The silver-haired investor, the one who had checked his laptop earlier, stood up. His name was Richard Calloway. He managed $11 billion in pension funds. He walked to the whiteboard, adjusted his glasses, and followed Whitney's math line by line. 30 seconds passed. A minute. Calloway traced her work with his finger, pausing at each correction. Then he turned to Harrington. She's right. 2 words. They hit the room like a brick through glass. Murmurs broke out. A woman in pearls set down her champagne and picked up her phone. 2 investors at the back table exchanged a glance, the kind that says, "We need to talk about our money." Harrington's jaw tightened. The smirk was gone. "That's one error," he said. His voice was clipped, strained. "One. Anyone can find one mistake if they stare at a board long enough. It's not one error, sir." Whitney was still writing. She hadn't turned around. The inflated decay constant feeds into your correlation matrix on the second panel. That skews the copula function, which means your joint default probabilities are off by a factor of 2.3. Every downstream projection in your model inherits that bias. She drew 3 arrows connecting the cascade, from the decay constant to the correlation matrix to the final output. Each arrow pointed to a different wrong number. Each wrong number had a circle around it. The board looked like a crime scene. She finished the last line, capped the marker, turned around. The whiteboard behind her was covered in her handwriting. Clean, methodical, devastating. Every correction was circled. Every flawed assumption was annotated. It looked like an autopsy of a $4 billion reputation. Calloway sat back down. He closed his laptop. He didn't need it anymore. A murmur rippled through the room. Not laughter this time. The sound people make when they realize they've been watching the wrong person. Harrington stood very still. His face had gone from red to pale. The live stream cameras were still rolling. 200,000 viewers online. The number had climbed since the confrontation began. Comments were flooding in. The hashtag was already forming. Hashtag Waitress versus Billionaire. Lucky guess, Harrington said. But the words came out thin, hollow, like a door slamming in an empty house. Whitney set the marker down on the tray. She didn't argue. She didn't gloat. She stood there, apron stained, hands chalked with blue ink, eyes steady, and let the board speak for itself. One investor near the back pulled out his phone and began typing. Another leaned over to his colleague and whispered, "Who the hell is she?" Nobody had an answer. But everyone in that room, every single one, had stopped laughing. Harrington should have let it go. He should have smiled, congratulated the waitress, called it a party trick, and moved on. That's what a smart man would have done. Grant Harrington was not a smart man. He was a proud one. "One equation doesn't make you a genius," he said. He was standing now, jacket unbuttoned, hands flat on the table. The ease was gone from his posture. Something harder had taken its place. Any grad student with a textbook could have caught that. You want to prove something? Fine. Let's really see what you've got. He turned to his CFO, a thin man named Philip Slade, and snapped his fingers. Bring up the oracle, the full model, every layer. Slade hesitated. Grant, that's proprietary. We don't... Bring it up. Slade opened his laptop and connected it to the projector. The screen beside the whiteboard filled with numbers. 17 pages of interconnected equations, risk matrices, probability trees, and stress test scenarios. The Oracle. Harrington Capital's crown jewel. 18 months of work by a team of 12 PhDs. The model that was supposed to make Harrington the most trusted name in quantitative finance. Here's the deal, Harrington said, turning back to Whitney. His voice carried the weight of a man who believed he was about to end a conversation permanently. You walk through my entire model, every layer, every assumption. You find the errors, if there are any, and you present them, right here, in front of my investors, on camera. He paused, let the silence build. You get it right, all of it. I'll write you a check for $5 million, right here, tonight. The room gasped. An actual, audible intake of breath from 30-plus people at the same time. But if you're wrong, Harrington continued, stepping closer, even once, even on a single decimal, you get on your knees and apologize to me in front of everyone. You tell this room you're a fraud. You tell the cameras, and then you leave. Permanently. A man at the third table shook his head and muttered, "Just let the girl go home. This is cruel." The woman beside him laughed. "Cruel? It's entertainment. She walked into this." Another investor raised his glass. $5 million says she cries before page 3. Whitney looked at the projection. 17 pages. Stochastic calculus layered with Bayesian inference. Copula dependencies feeding into tail risk simulations that most quant desks would need a week to audit. This wasn't a party trick anymore. This was a war. She looked at Harrington. His eyes were bright with the certainty of a man who believed he had just set a trap no waitress could survive. $5 million, Whitney said. $5 million. And the cameras stay on? Harrington spread his hands. The whole world gets to watch. Whitney nodded slowly. She looked at the projection one more time. Then she looked back at Harrington. I'll need a bigger whiteboard. The room erupted, not in laughter, in noise. Chairs scraped. Phones came out again. Someone in the back shouted, "This is insane!" A producer from the media crew spoke into his headset. Keep every camera rolling. Do not cut. The live stream counter jumped. 300,000. Then 400,000. Then 500,000. The comments were scrolling so fast they blurred. Hashtag Waitress versus Billionaire was now the #1 trend on every platform. Harrington's team wheeled in a second whiteboard, then a third. They lined them up side by side, 6 feet of blank white surface, waiting for ink. Whitney stood in front of them, marker in hand, the projected model glowing beside her. She was a 26-year-old black waitress in a stained apron, standing in the most expensive private dining room in Manhattan, about to audit a $4 billion hedge fund's risk model in front of 500,000 people. And she wasn't shaking. Not even a little. Harrington leaned over to Slade. This'll be over in 10 minutes. She'll choke. Slade didn't answer. He was watching Whitney's eyes. They were moving across the projection, fast, systematic, absorbing. He'd seen that look before, on the best quants in the building, the ones who could read a data set the way a conductor reads a score. He'd never seen it on someone who hadn't been to college. "Grant," Slade said quietly, "I think we might have a problem." Harrington ignored him. Whitney started with page 1. She read the projection line by line, her eyes scanning left to right, top to bottom, the way most people read a novel. But Whitney wasn't reading. She was deconstructing. Each equation was a wall, and she was looking for the bricks that didn't fit. The room was quiet. Not the polite quiet of a dinner party, the tense quiet of a courtroom waiting for a verdict. She picked up the marker and wrote on the first whiteboard. A clean re-derivation of the model's base assumptions, the interest rate inputs, the volatility surface, the correlation structure. She worked fast, but not rushed. Every line followed the last, like links in a chain. No gaps, no hesitations. Page 1, clean, no errors. She moved to page 2. Harrington watched from the head of the table, arms crossed, chin up. He turned to a guest, a venture capitalist named Douglas Pratt, and said, loud enough for the room, "She's stalling, buying time. Watch, she'll start making things up soon." Pratt nodded, but his eyes stayed on the whiteboard. Page 2. Whitney flagged a minor inconsistency in the volatility smile calibration. She corrected it in 3 lines. Not a fatal error, a rounding shortcut that Harrington's team had taken to save processing time. But it introduced a small bias. She noted it, circled it, and moved on. Page 3. Clean. Page 4. Another shortcut. This one in the correlation matrix. A simplification that assumed static pairwise correlations when the underlying assets were dynamic. Whitney rewrote the block using a time-varying copula. It took her 4 minutes. The young analyst from earlier, the one who had recognized her technique, was now sitting at the edge of his seat, his dinner untouched, his mouth slightly open. Harrington shifted in his chair. He uncrossed his arms, crossed them again, reached for his water, put it down without drinking. Page 5. Whitney stopped. She tapped the board twice with the back of her marker. Then she turned to the projection and pointed at a cluster of parameters near the bottom of the page. This section uses a Gaussian copula to model joint default risk, she said. But the underlying data set includes high-yield bonds from the 2008 crisis. The Gaussian copula famously failed during that period because it underestimates tail dependence. Your model is using a tool that already broke once, in exactly the conditions it's supposed to predict. She didn't wait for a response. She wrote the correction, a Clayton copula with adjusted tail parameters, and showed how the risk profile changed. The difference was significant. Under Harrington's model, the probability of a simultaneous default event was 0.3%. Under Whitney's correction, it was 4.1%. 13 times higher. Calloway stood up again. He didn't walk to the board this time. He didn't need to. He turned to the investor beside him and said, clearly, "I'm pulling my allocation first thing Monday morning." The words spread through the room like fire through paper. 2 more investors reached for their phones. One woman closed her portfolio binder and slid it into her bag. Harrington felt it. His jaw tightened. He stood up and walked to Whitney. "You're cherry-picking," he said. "You're finding minor issues and blowing them up to look smart. The core model is sound." Whitney didn't argue. She turned back to the projection and moved to page 6. Then Harrington played dirty. He walked to Slade and whispered something. Slade hesitated, then typed on his laptop. The projection flickered. When it came back, the layout had changed. Pages had been reordered, and 2 sections Whitney had already reviewed were swapped with new ones she hadn't seen. The parameters looked different. The notation had shifted. They were changing the model while she was auditing it. Whitney stared at the screen. Her marker hand paused. For the first time all evening, her rhythm broke. She blinked, looked at the whiteboard where her previous corrections sat, looked back at the screen. The numbers didn't match anymore. A murmur went through the crowd. Harrington smiled, wide, full of teeth. "Problem?" he said. "I thought you were a genius." Whitney closed her eyes. 3 seconds. 4. When she opened them, she started from the top of the rearranged page. She didn't complain. She didn't call it unfair. She rebuilt her frame of reference from scratch, tracing the new layout back to the original architecture she'd already mapped in her head. It cost her 6 minutes. 6 minutes she didn't have. Pages 6 and 7, restructured, clean. Whitney noted them as structurally sound and moved on. She wasn't performing. She wasn't showboating. She was auditing, methodically, relentlessly, without emotion. That made it worse for Harrington. If she had been arrogant, he could have attacked her character. If she had been wrong, he could have attacked her math. But she was quiet, and she was right, and he had no weapon for that. Page 8. Whitney found the third significant error. A bootstrap resampling procedure that used overlapping windows, introducing autocorrelation into the confidence intervals. She corrected it. The model's claimed 94% accuracy dropped to 71%. Harrington's face went white. Slade leaned over and whispered, "Grant, we should stop this. Now." "No." Harrington's voice was a blade. "She finishes, and when she makes a mistake, one mistake, it's over." But Whitney wasn't making mistakes. She was moving through the model like water through a cracked dam, finding every gap, every weakness, every assumption that had been left unchecked because no one on Harrington's team had thought to question them. Or maybe they had, and they'd been too afraid to speak up. Pages 9 through 12 went faster. Whitney's rhythm was locked in now. Scan, identify, correct, move. She filled the second whiteboard, started on the third. Her handwriting stayed small and precise. Her breathing stayed even. The marker squeaked against the board in a rhythm that had become the only sound in the room. The live stream had crossed 1 million viewers. The hashtag had spawned 3 others. Hashtag MathGenius. Hashtag The Waitress Who Knew. Hashtag Harrington Exposed. News outlets were picking it up. A CNN anchor tweeted, "Is anyone else watching this live stream? This waitress is dismantling a billionaire's entire model in real time." Harrington sat down. He didn't announce it. He didn't make a statement. He just sat. The fight was draining out of him, and everyone in the room could see it, the way you can see a balloon losing air, slowly, silently, until there's nothing left but wrinkled skin. Whitney reached page 13, then 14, then 15. She was more than halfway through, and she hadn't been wrong once. The clock on the wall read 42 minutes. Harrington had given her 45. 3 minutes left. 4 pages to go. Whitney looked at the clock, looked at the board, and kept writing. Page 16. 2 minutes left. Whitney's marker moved across the third whiteboard, filling the last empty space in the upper corner. She was almost through, almost done. And then she stopped. Not a pause, a full stop. The kind where your hand freezes and your eyes narrow and something cold slides down your spine. She stepped back from the board, looked at the projection, looked at her own corrections, then looked at page 16 again. Something was wrong. Not with her math, with the problem itself. She turned to Harrington. Where did the data on page 16 come from? Harrington raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? It came from the model, same as every other page.
No.
Whitney shook her head slowly. It didn't. The variant structure on this page doesn't match the rest of the model. The base parameters are different. The boundary conditions are incompatible with pages 14 and 15. She pointed at a line of numbers near the bottom of the projection. This page was written separately, and the convergence constant, right here, has been manually overridden. Someone changed it from 0.062 to 0.091. The room went cold. That override makes the system of equations on this page unsolvable, Whitney said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were not. There's no valid output. You can run it 1,000 times and it will never converge. This page was designed to fail. Silence. The kind that rings in your ears. Whitney turned to face Harrington directly. You gave me a rigged test. Harrington didn't flinch, but he didn't speak either. His fingers curled around the edge of his chair. Slade, sitting beside him, closed his eyes and exhaled through his nose. The slow breath of a man watching a building collapse from the inside. The live stream comments exploded. The word rigged appeared 1,000 times in 10 seconds. Hashtag rigged test began trending before Whitney finished her sentence. Viewers were screenshotting the override, tagging the SEC, tagging journalists. But Whitney wasn't done. She turned back to the board, picked up the marker, and in the next 90 seconds, she did something no one in that room expected. She reversed the override, restored the original constant, rebuilt the convergence pathway from scratch, and solved the equation that was never meant to be solved. She capped the marker, set it down gently on the tray. Page 16, she said. Done. The clock on the wall read 44 minutes and 38 seconds. 22 seconds to spare. Harrington stared at the board. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time all evening, Grant Harrington had absolutely nothing to say. The applause hadn't even started when Harrington stood up. She cheated! The words landed like a slap. The room, which had been tilting toward Whitney for the last 44 minutes, froze. She cheated, Harrington repeated, louder now. He pointed at Whitney. There is no way on this earth that a waitress with no degree, no training, no credentials of any kind walks in here and audits a model built by 12 PhDs. She had access to the system beforehand. Someone on my team leaked it. He turned to Slade. Find out who. Slade opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked like a man who'd been asked to find a fire exit on a sinking ship. Harrington turned to the room. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this circus. What you just witnessed was not genius. It was theft, corporate espionage, and I will be pressing charges. The murmurs returned. But this time they were different, uncertain. A few investors nodded. A few more looked at Whitney with narrowed eyes. The narrative was shifting, not because Harrington's accusation made sense, but because the alternative was too uncomfortable. If Whitney was real, if she was telling the truth, then every person in that room had watched a brilliant woman be humiliated for 40 minutes and done nothing. It was easier to believe she cheated. The restaurant manager appeared. His name was Victor Crane. He was a tall man with thin lips and a permanent expression of controlled panic. He walked straight to Whitney. "Miss Adams, I need you to step away from the presentation area." "I didn't cheat," Whitney said. "That's not for me to decide." Crane's voice was low, professional, final. "Mr. Harrington is our guest. This is his event. I need you to collect your things and leave the premises. Tonight." "You're firing me?" Crane didn't answer, which was an answer. Whitney stood in the middle of the room, 3 whiteboards behind her, covered in her handwriting, a projection screen glowing with a model she'd just dismantled, 1,000,000 viewers watching on a screen she couldn't see. And now she was being told to leave, not because she was wrong, but because she was right, and the wrong person didn't like it. She looked at the faces around her, the investors who had laughed at her, the ones who had filmed her, the ones who had whispered, "The audacity," and 5 million says she cries. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them said, "Wait, let her stay. She earned this." The loneliest place in the world is a room full of people who know you're right and choose to say nothing. Whitney's hand trembled, not from fear, from the weight of it. The weight of being brilliant and black and broke and standing in a room that would rather call her a criminal than admit she was smarter than the richest man at the table. She thought about Bria, watching at home. 14 years old, sitting cross-legged on the couch, seeing her sister get thrown out on a live stream. What would Bria learn from this? That talent doesn't matter? That the truth doesn't matter? That no matter how good you are, someone with enough money can make you disappear? Whitney picked up her apron from the chair where she'd set it down. She folded it neatly, held it in both hands. Then she put it back on. "I didn't cheat," she said again, quieter this time. Not to Harrington, not to Crane, to the cameras, to the 1,000,000 people watching, to Bria. "And I can prove it." She turned back to the whiteboard. "Give me a new problem, any problem, one I've never seen. Let someone in this room choose it, and I'll solve it right here, right now, with nothing but this marker." The room held its breath. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then a voice came from the back of the room. Calm, clear. The kind of voice that didn't need volume to command attention. "I'll give her one." Every head turned. A woman stood up from the last table, silver hair pulled back, no jewelry, a plain black blazer over a white shirt. She looked like she'd wandered in from a university lecture hall, which, in a way, she had. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Voss, professor of applied mathematics at MIT, Fields Medal nominee, author of 11 papers that had reshaped how the world understood topological data analysis. She'd been invited tonight as a courtesy. Harrington liked to surround himself with credentialed names. She hadn't said a word all evening. Until now. Dr. Voss walked to the whiteboard. She moved slowly, deliberately, the way someone handles something fragile. She picked up a marker, a red one, and began to write. The equation she put on the board was nothing like what Harrington had written. It was sparse, elegant, deceptively short. 3 lines of notation that looked almost simple, until you understood what they were asking. It was a problem in persistent homology, a branch of topology that studies the shape of data across multiple dimensions. Specifically, it asked for a closed-form stability bound on a filtration of simplicial complexes under perturbation. Dr. Voss's own research group at MIT had been working on this problem for 3 years. They had published partial results. They had not solved it. No one had. Dr. Voss capped the marker and turned to Whitney. "Take as long as you need," she said. No condescension, no spectacle. Just one mathematician speaking to another. Whitney looked at the board. She read the notation once, twice. Her lips moved slightly, the way they did when she was mapping a problem's architecture in her head, finding the walls, the doors, the hidden rooms. The room was silent. The live stream had crossed 2 million viewers. No one typed in the chat. No one scrolled. 2 million people held their breath at the same time. Whitney picked up the blue marker. She started at the top left corner of the clean whiteboard, the one Harrington's team had wheeled in and never expected to be used. Her handwriting was different now. Not the small, precise script she'd used during the audit. This was larger, bolder, like she was writing for the room to see, like she wanted them to follow. She began with the filtration structure, defining the nested sequence of simplicial complexes and establishing the inclusion maps between them. Standard setup, textbook. But then she did something unexpected. Instead of attacking the stability bound directly, the way every researcher at MIT had tried, she reframed the problem. She introduced a secondary metric space, mapped the filtration into it using a Lipschitz continuous function, and showed that the stability question in the original space was equivalent to a contraction mapping problem in the new one. It was a lateral move. The kind of insight that doesn't come from studying. It comes from seeing. From a mind that doesn't just process mathematics, but dreams in it. Dr. Voss's hand went to her mouth. Whitney kept writing. She derived the contraction bound, showed it was uniform across the filtration, and used it to establish the stability inequality in 4 clean steps. No leaps, no hand-waving. Every line followed from the last with the inevitability of gravity. The young analyst, the one who had recognized her technique earlier, stood up. He wasn't the only one. 3 more people rose to their feet, craning their necks to see the board. A woman in the front row put both hands flat on the table, as if steadying herself. 38 minutes. Whitney wrote the final line. A single inequality. The stability bound. Explicit, closed form, sharp. She underlined it twice. Then she set the marker down. She didn't turn around. She stood facing the board, breathing. The ink was still drying. The room was so quiet you could hear the ventilation system humming through the ceiling. Dr. Voss walked to the board. She adjusted her glasses. She followed Whitney's proof from the first line to the last, her finger tracing each step the way a jeweler examines a stone. Slowly, carefully, looking for the flaw that would change everything. She reached the final line, stopped, read it again, then she turned to face the room. "This is correct." 2 words, but the way she said them, softly, with something trembling underneath, made them sound like a cathedral bell. "This is not only correct," Dr. Voss continued. Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. "This is a novel proof. This approach, the metric space reduction, has never been published. It solves a problem that my department has worked on for 3 years." She paused, swallowed. "I have colleagues who have spent their entire careers trying to find this bound." She turned to Whitney. "Where did you study?" "I didn't," Whitney said. The silence that followed was the loudest thing that had happened all night. Then the room broke. It started with the young analyst. He clapped. Once, twice, 3 times. Then the woman in the front row joined. Then Calloway. Then 3 more. Then 10. Then everyone. 30+ people standing, applauding, some with their hands pressed together hard enough to whiten their knuckles. One woman was crying. She didn't wipe her eyes. She just stood there, clapping, tears running down her cheeks, looking at a waitress in a stained apron who had just done something impossible. The live stream chat was a wall of fire. 2 million messages in 60 seconds. Heart emojis, crying emojis. "Who is she?" repeated 1,000 times. Hashtag #MathGenius was now trending in 14 countries. Whitney stood in front of the whiteboard, blue ink on her fingers, the apron still tied around her waist. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She was breathing, just breathing. She turned and looked at Harrington. He was sitting in his chair, hands in his lap, face gray. His mouth was a thin, flat line. The grin was gone. The swagger was gone. The $4.2 billion certainty that had carried him through every room he'd ever entered, gone. Whitney didn't say anything cruel. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She looked him in the eye and said quietly, "You asked me if I could count past the number of plates I carry." She glanced at the board behind her. 3 whiteboards covered edge to edge in her handwriting. "I can." The applause was still going when Dr. Voss raised her hand. The room quieted, not because she demanded it, but because when Eleanor Voss wanted to speak, people listened. "I want to make something clear," she said. She was standing beside Whitney now, facing the room, facing the cameras. What this young woman just demonstrated is not a party trick. It is not a lucky guess. It is not something you learn by reading a few textbooks. She paused. Let the words settle. She just produced a novel proof to an open problem in algebraic topology, a problem that has resisted solution by some of the best mathematicians in the world, including me. She turned to Whitney. "I am offering you a full scholarship to MIT, effective immediately. Full tuition, housing, research stipend. You will join my lab as a graduate researcher." Whitney's hand went to her mouth. She didn't speak. She couldn't. The room erupted again. Louder this time. Messier. The kind of noise that happens when people stop being polite and start being human. The young analyst was on his feet, fist in the air. Calloway was nodding, his jaw tight, his eyes red. The woman who had been crying clapped harder. But the night wasn't done with Grant Harrington. A man in a dark suit stood up from the second table. His name was Arthur Keene, securities attorney. He'd been quiet all evening, watching, noting, recording. "Mr. Harrington," Keene said, his voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "You made a public wager on a live stream in front of," he checked his phone, 2.4 million viewers. You offered $5 million if this woman could identify the errors in your model. She did. She also proved that page 16 was deliberately altered to produce a false negative, which, I should note, raises serious questions about investor disclosures. The room went quiet. A different kind of quiet now. The legal kind. "The wager is binding," Keene continued. "I'd recommend you honor it. Tonight, on camera, before this becomes something significantly more expensive than $5 million. Harrington looked at Keene. He looked at the cameras. He looked at the 2.4 million people watching him from the other side of a lens. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. Harrington wrote the check in silence. $5 million. His hand was steady, but his jaw was not. He tore it from the book and held it out without looking at her. Whitney took it, folded it once, slipped it into her apron pocket, the same pocket where she kept her order pad and her 70-cent pen. "I underestimated you," Harrington said. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't enough. But it was the first honest thing he'd said all night. "Most people do," Whitney said. She untied her apron, set it on the table where she'd served drinks 3 hours ago. Then she walked toward the door. Calloway intercepted her. He handed her his card. "Call me Monday. I fund scholarships. Real ones, not bets." Behind him, 2 more investors approached, cards out, hands extended, faces nothing like the ones that had laughed 90 minutes ago. Dr. Voss was already on the phone with her department chair at MIT. The live stream ended at 2.6 million viewers. The clip of Whitney saying, "I didn't," when asked where she studied, was viewed 41 million times in 24 hours. It was shared by professors, athletes, news anchors, and a 14-year-old girl in the Bronx who posted it with one word: "That's my sister." 6 months later, Whitney Adams sat in a lecture hall at MIT. Front row. Her first paper, on stability bounds in persistent homology, was accepted by the annals of mathematics. The reviewers called it a landmark contribution. She still carried a 70-cent notebook. But the kitchen floor was gone. The cracked phone was gone. The apron was gone. Some people wait their whole lives for the world to see them. Whitney Adams didn't wait. She picked up a marker and made them look. I told you this story because I think about it a lot. How many Whitneys are out there right now, carrying plates, mopping floors, solving equations nobody will ever see? Talent doesn't care about your zip code or your skin color. If this story made you feel something, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today. If Whitney's story moved you, drop a comment. Tell me about a time someone underestimated you. Share this with someone who needs it. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be told. Hashtag Justice for Whitney. Hashtag Math Genius. Hashtag Waitress versus Billionaire. I told you this story because I think about it a lot. How many Whitneys are out there right now, carrying plates, mopping floors, solving equations nobody will ever see? Talent doesn't care about your zip code or your skin color. If this story made you feel something, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it today.